Hey, welcome back to Fashion Year. Today's a very special video, very different from what we usually do. We actually have, a guest with us today. This is James from the collab, and today we'll be doing kind of a mid-season review of 5 of the 10 teams. We've already talked about the odd-numbered teams in the Constructors Championship, and here on in this video we'll be talking about the even ranked teams in the Constructors Championship. James, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. Can't complain. Loving the season so far. I thought it was going to be a much more boring season than it really was. And so I tell you what, I'm so happy that we've ended up having a good a season as we have. I can't believe it. I'm ecstatic. I mean, one of the best British Grand Prix, especially if you are a Hamilton fan. It's absolutely amazing. And yeah, we've now finally got races, Sebastian, where you don't know exactly who is going to win when you start the weekend. What more do you want?
Yeah, I know, it's incredible. Like in my pre-weekend preview videos, I'll do like some little simple predictions. I'll just try to predict the podium. And basically for the last year and a half, I would predict Verstappen
Oh,
win, and I would be right about 95% of the time, just like that. Um, but of course, now it's much more difficult with how things are. So let's get right into it. So first, we'll be talking about McLaren, second in the constructors' championship. They've had a very strong season, building off of that incredible development that they showed in 2023, and now they're arguably the strongest team on pace. But they only have 2 wins to show for it. Uh, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, of course, getting their maiden wins, and in
mm.
Miami and in Hungary. So again, James, what are your thoughts on McLaren? Where do you think that uh, their season kind of stacks up, and do you think that maybe they're having some issues executing on that excellent pace?
Yeah, I think they had. You're right. You're absolutely right. They had an amazing start to the season. The amazing, second half of the first half of the season started off not too great. The issues are, I think, in the pit stops. I mean, you just need to look at the British Grand Prix. However, I mean, we're at a place with McLaren where Lando Norris probably could have won 3 or 4 Grand and be a lot closer to Max in the Drivers' Championship. But I honestly think, as good as bad as McLaren have sometimes been on their strategy, been a bit silly. For example, with Hungary, the way they dealt that was a PR disaster. I can't help but feel that Lando needs to look himself in the mirror more and think a lot, most of the problems is his fault. Imola, nothing he could have done. Spain could have got a better start. Silverstone probably should have said the medium tyres and went along essentially with what his team said. Hungary once again could have got a better start. Belgium could have got a better start and try keeping that rear tyre out of the gravel. You may have done better. I like the guy. I love him. He's one of my favourite drivers. I don't mean to lambast on him, but I think he needs to look in the mirror as to a lot of the reasons why he's so far behind Verstappen. But that's
Yeah,
harsh,
yeah,
really.
yeah. I think it's very accurate. Really accurate picture of what's been happening. I think for McLaren, it feels like they're in a
Mm.
similar situation to Red Bull, kind of the years 2017, 18, 19, 20 or so, where they have a car that's very strong in terms of absolute downforce, arguably the best car in the corners by a good margin, but their
Yeah.
straight line speed just makes things so much more difficult on race day. Like Oscar Piastri, I think if you had the DRS efficiency of the Red Bull, for example, you would be able to win the uh, Belgium. He would have been able to win the Belgian Grand Prix pretty easily, for example.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's
Let's just
right. That's right.
yeah, let's just continue where we left off. I
Okay.
think so. Oscar Piastri, again, I think yeah, like you said,
Yes,
he's been
Oscar Piastri.
very strong, coming on very strongly the last month or two of the season, to the point where he's at least within touching distance in the drivers' championship of Lando
Mm.
Norris. And if that were to continue, again, there'd be a lot of questions about, who's number one driver at McLaren.
Definitely. Yeah, there would be. Yeah. What did before we just finish with McLaren, I guess? What did you think then about the way Lando Norris um, showed the world not what he's really right, but the way Lando handled the Hungary incident and the way McLaren handled Hungary?
Oh, I think for Hungary, it's a tricky situation. I think in terms of laying blame for creating that situation, I think 95% of that really lays with McLaren, the team. They could have easily have done the pit stops in the other order, pitted Piastri first,
Yes.
pitted Norris second. They would have come out in the same order. It would have basically completely changed how things developed. For Norris, I think there are, I wouldn't say questions, but there's always talk about how focused he is, how hungry he is to win in the kind of the same way that Max Verstappen is, for example. And again, I think that strong reluctance to give the position back to Piastri, I think is actually a good thing because it does show how competitive he is, how much he wants to win. Again, you can talk about him about if this is something that they agreed to beforehand, how he should have respected that decision and let Piastri through right away. But again, at the same time, these are top level athletes. They have to have some ego. They have to be a bit selfish if they want to be successful, especially in a pretty individual sport like Formula One. So again, it's something where I understand why there's so much pushback against Lando and for how he handled that
Yeah.
situation. But I think it's very, very understandable given the situation
No,
that he was
definitely.
kind of put in by the team. So I
Yeah,
think,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah. So that's
completely
kind of
agree.
our look at McLaren. Pretty good car. A little bit of uncertainty with how things are going on this in terms of execution. Again, with the drama from Hungary. So again, that's one team using McLaren Mercedes power units. Another team using the Mercedes power units is obviously also the Works Mercedes team, who, despite the fact that they sit fourth in the Constructors' Championship right now, have won 3 of the last 4 Grand Prix. And again, look to be the best car on form. Very, very interesting. Again, also very, very strong development through the season. They were easily 4th best team for the first 4 or 5
Yeah,
races. And again, never really looking like they were going to be able to compete for podiums or even wins later this year. So again, I think it just shows how tight F1 is with the cost cap and with the ground effect rules. So James, what's your take on Mercedes? Where do you think they can go into the second half of the
well,
season?
well, yeah, Sebastian, I think you hit the nail on the head. For the first time since 2022, they seem to actually understand the actual rule set and they're making a car and the improvements are working consistently. Where, unlike in 22, where they won one race weekend and there'll be no the next. And at least this weekend, they seem to be consistently there or thereabouts. Arguably, you can make an argument, for example, at Spa, they were the first or second fastest team. You could make an argument for that in Spa. It's such a shame that Russell ended up getting disqualified. But
Yeah,
the important thing is they are improving and improving. And even when Lewis Hamilton goes, I think that George Russell has shown pretty much. No, I don't think he's a Lewis Hamilton yet, but I think he leaves. Hamilton leaves Mercedes with a safe pair of hands with George Russell, irrespective of how good Kimi Antonelli is potentially going to be.
yeah. No, I really agree. I think Russell's definitely improved year on year. Uh, he's like in
Mm,
qualifying. I think the data is pretty clear. Hamilton was slightly ahead first year.
yeah.
They were almost dead even last year, and now Russell's slightly ahead. Again, some of that's going to be natural improvement from
Yes.
George. A bit of that's going to also be, a bit of decline in terms of qualifying pace from Lewis. I think, for George, I think his biggest issue right now is race pace and also kind of ironing out some of those little mistakes here and there that we do still see from him from time to time. But that being said, I think the raw pace
Yep.
is really, really strong. And I think, regardless of who they pick up, we know it's probably going to be Kimi Antonelli, but I think they're in a good position moving forward in 2025 on the driver lineup side, at least. So I guess Mercedes, driver lineup probably going to be Antonelli and Russell.
Yeah.
All signs are pointing that way. I think on the car side, I think it's really going to be a question of are they able to bring this form through into second half of the season, which I think is pretty likely. Again, unless they bring some upgrade to the car that makes things fall off massively, or uh, again, I think the bigger questions can be 2025. Last year, the regulations, again, should be about the same as this year. So again, if things are looking strong going into the second half of this year, in theory, things should be pretty good next year. But again, 2026, I think it's going to be a big question mark. Where do you think Mercedes are in terms of 2026, and where do you think they'll end up in that
That's an
respect?
that's an interesting one because a lot of people are thinking they got the best engine uh,
Mm,
for 2026. A lot of people are suggesting they're ahead. Is it just conjecture? I mean, you've got to think they are not going to have the worst engine, and if they're not the best engine, it's going to be up there probably with the best.
yeah,
But the big question is going to be that, I mean, what won them in 2014 was their engine. What lost them out in 2022 was their aerodynamics and the design of the car. Their engine couldn't make up for it. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen in 2026. I think they will be one of the fastest. What I hope for 2026 is, though, no team dominates like Red Bull and Mercedes did at the beginning. That's what I don't think anyone wants that. I think they're looking really, really good. It wouldn't surprise me if we ever come back here again, Sebastian, and we're doing a half season review in 2026. It wouldn't surprise me if someone like George Russell is leading the championship. It wouldn't. I'm still not saying it's going to happen,
mm,
but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be too surprised if he's up there.
yeah. No, I wouldn't be surprised either. I think realistically, for Mercedes, history shows that they've generally done pretty well with new engine regulations, as we saw in
Mm,
2014. And again, they kind of came back into the sport 2010. So we don't really have a whole lot more data based on
no.
that. I think if they were still struggling massively like they were parts of 2022, parts of 2023, understanding ground effect concept cars, I think you can make an argument that maybe they would struggle a bit 2026 because again, the aerodynamic on the aerodynamic side, it will still effectively be the same type of car. So again, even if they had the strongest engine, perhaps their engine customer McLaren would actually be the favorite and not the works team themselves. But because
Definitely.
they've developed so well last, last 6 months or so, I do think at this point they are probably the favorites. I think the other team that will be competing with them is Ferrari. Again, with in term looking at all of the works teams together, I think Ferrari is probably after Mercedes the most likely team to have a good car. But unfortunately, we know how many issues operationally Ferrari has had, and again, they have a pretty bad history with new regulations
Yes.
in general. So again, there's two kind of big red flags there on Ferrari's record. So again, yeah, I really agree with you. I think that come 2026, I think Mercedes are probably going to be the big favorites. It's just a matter of who else could kind of potentially bring the fight to them.
Yeah, no, I think you're right hitting the nail on the head. Would you really what you wouldn't bet the house against Mercedes?
Yeah,
No, definitely not. I think you're right. I think they're potentially going to be one of the favourites going into the 2026 into that new rule set. And also 2025. Who knows what's going to happen there? With
yeah,
Kimi Antonelli, how good is he? Because I think Formula Two, his team struggled a bit. We don't know. And how many people have been the next big thing coming into Formula One from a lower formula? And unlike Max, unlike Lewis, Lando, and George, they've not really, and Leclerc, they've not impressed. That has happened as well. So
yeah. The Antonelli situation in F2 is quite interesting. It's very unusual that you would see F1 teams be so high on two drivers that
mm,
are generally struggling
yes,
on paper, struggling so much in the second series below in the series below F1. And you look at the drivers who are leading the championship. You have Hajar again. He's had his name linked to RB a little bit. You have Paul Aaron, who of course was a former Mercedes junior who got dropped, and I have not seen him linked anywhere, given the fact that despite the fact that he's the highest ranked rookie and having a very, very good season himself. You have Gabriel Bortoleto, who again, McLaren Jr. McLaren, two very good young drivers right now. There's no space for him. So we have this very odd situation where the top drivers in the standings are basically not being talked about for F1 realistically. And you have Behrman, who's 14th on 36 points, I believe, basically getting promoted based on his drive in Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia. We saw how that went with Nick
Yes.
DeVries, but again, I do think that this was a bit more impressive than that Nick DeVries performance. And then, of course, you have Antonelli in the same team, Prema team, doing a better job. Again, he's sixth in the championship, I think, right now. It's a really, really interesting situation. Again, I wonder what's going on behind the scenes. I think there'd be a lot of pressure on Bruno Michel, the guy behind F2 and F3. They, ask why is this happening? Why are the guys 6th and 14th in the championship likely to both be promoted? Why are the guys at the top not being promoted? Right? It really suggests that the F1 teams have access to data showing that these two guys are really the best drivers. But then why are they struggling? And isn't F2 supposed to be a spec series, right? So again,
Yeah, I mean, I know Prima struggling with their car. You're right; it's supposed to be a spec series, so I guess teams struggle. They shouldn't be struggling as much as they do. And then why does constantly the is not really get an F1 drive? And part of me always thinks that one way of sorting it out is maybe, and it's going to it all comes down to money. If the winner of the F2 series gets a sponsorship from Formula One for like 10, 20, for like 10 million or something ridiculous, to the point where a mid F1 team almost couldn't say no to having him for like a year or two just because it's with the money and they know he's good. But they need to do something. And you're right, it is a spec series. Many
yeah,
questions, I think, for especially for Formula Two. It's really bizarre.
yeah, yeah, really, really bizarre season. But speaking of young drivers, I think the team that's always historically been the young driver team, RB, Toro Rosso, Alpha
Yep.
Tauri, sixth in the championship. I call them Racing Bulls quite a bit. I know officially that's not what they're called, but again, on the Wikipedia page, if you look,
Yeah.
that company is called Racing Bulls. Um, they've had, I think, a good season. I think sixth in the championship's honestly pretty good, especially given where they were this
Mm.
time last year. I think they only had 2 points the first half of last season. But again,
Yeah.
a lot of the questions at the team are about their drivers. Their current drivers, Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo. Tsunoda, of course, staying on for 2025, we know. And again, the second seat hasn't been confirmed yet. Will it be Ricciardo? Will it be Lawson? Will it be perhaps Hadjar, like we mentioned before, talking briefly about F2? I think it's a really interesting situation. So I'm really curious what your take is. Who do you think will be Yuki Tsunoda's teammate next year?
Oh, that is a tough one, isn't it? Um, and it's a shame that we say Yuki Tsunoda is teammate because out of the three drivers, including Perez, I honestly thought Yuki Tsunoda would make, at the moment, with the data we've got, the most sense to replace Sergio Perez in the second half of the year. That's not happening. Will Daniel Ricciardo keep? I think at this point Ricciardo needs to beat Tsunoda a lot, like 2/3 of the time to keep his seat. I still think it's in his hands to keep his seat. I do think Sergio Perez will go by the end of the year or at the end of the year, and it wouldn't surprise me if Ricardo or Lawson end up moving up, or if they get rid of Ricardo. But I think one of the people you mentioned, Ricardo, maybe Sonoda still, Lawson and Hadjar, one of them. I mean, one of those four is, I think, going to be in a Red Bull seat next year.
Yeah,
Naturally, but then they have to put Lawson somewhere as well. Otherwise, his contract runs out. I mean, do they make Hadjar the test driver for next year for Red Bull with a view of promising him, thinking Ricardo might retire or whatever, or one of them, or Sonoda
yeah,
might go, or promising him a seat for next year? But he's been, as you said, he's leading Formula Two.
yeah,
You could make an argument that he's more impressive than Kimi Antonelli and Oliver Behrman at the moment. When you just look at the stats and the data. So
yeah.
how could you not? How could you not, like, at least, if not give him a seat, give him a test? I think then between now and the end of the season, it's going to be really fascinating with the whole of the Red Bull company, including the Racing Bulls, as to who goes where.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's very, very interesting. I think for Hadjar, I think his only realistic path to an F1 seat next year is if Red Bull get rid of both Perez and Ricardo. Uh,
Mm.
You would basically in
Yeah.
that situation, you would basically have Tsunoda up at Red Bull, and then you would have Lawson and Hadjar at RB. Um, Probably not going to happen. I think they're probably only going to drop one driver, if at all. And I think it really feels like how this situation at RB goes really is going to be dependent on how the internal power struggle, who makes the decisions. And again, Helmut Marko has historically been the guy who makes the decisions in terms of driver personnel. But again, with this whole power struggle between the Austrian side and again the Christian Horner side, the Thai side, it seems like
Yeah.
that decision making power is shifting more towards the Horner side. And again,
Yes.
we know how much Horner likes Perez. He likes Ricardo. He doesn't want to drop them, despite the fact that the numbers suggest that maybe he should. Uh, and again, maybe not as high on some of these younger drivers. So again, I think if we come back in 2025 and we see the exact same lineup at both Red Bull and at RB, I think it would really suggest that for Horner's really kind of won this struggle in terms of deciding who picks the drivers and who really has the power at Red Bull. For Lawson, I think it would be a massive shame. He showed in his 5 races last year that he's definitely capable of being an F1 driver and being a pretty good
Definitely.
one at that. I think I do understand some of the concerns around Lawson, though, in terms of his one lap speed. He never took a pole position in his 2 years in Formula 2. Same as Mick Schumacher. And again, Mick Schumacher is generally seen as a guy who is maybe for race pace definitely good enough for F1, but the qualifying, he lost qualifying to Magnussen. We've seen how Magnussen's lost to Hulkenberg in qualifying the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So do you really want another guy who's not gotten an F2 pole, who might struggle in qualifying again? I think that's really the one knock against Lawson. The race pace, racecraft looks very, very good. And again, the other thing that he has going for him is that his adaptability is so strong. He came second in DTM, and I believe 2021 that was his first year. Came second in Super Formula 2023, and again his rookie season in that series as well. So he found incredible adaptability. And I think that's something that's quite a unique trait to kind of build your F1 case off of. But again, the F2 data is not super amazing for Lawson, which I think is part of the reason why he didn't get that initial call in 2022. And that's why De Vries ended up in that situation. But again, if he doesn't get it, I think he has an outside shot of perhaps getting a seat at Audi. But again, maybe. That's a pretty fluid situation overall, I think, over there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, for me, the ultimate would be to have Lawson Hadjar in the same team and see who's better over a season. I would love that.
Yeah, that would be very, very interesting. But yeah, it seems like the car isn't the main thing. It's really the drivers has really been the massive talking point. So again, I think after RB, let's see, we've done Haas already in your video, and that means that we're going to Alpine in 8th.
Yes.
What a season from Alpine, eh? They've gone from 4th in 2022, 6th in 2023, and they're currently 8th in 2024, which means at the rate they're going, they're going to end up 10th in 2025, and then they're going to be 12th. They're going to have some fictional teams ahead of them in 2026. So again, it's been pretty much an unmitigated disaster of a season for Alpine. What do you make of it?
Well, as you said, fictional teams, meaning I'm pretty sure Apex Grand Prix from the new Formula One film is going to score more points than them. Yeah, come 2026, I think you're definitely ahead of the curve there. What do I think? I think they've. Bearing in mind, Andretti got told no for Formula One. Yeah, Andretti got told you can't come before you're not good enough. This team are, I mean, a bit of a joke at the moment. They got rid of Otmar last year. They got rid of Alan Permain. Okay, fair enough then. They didn't replace them with anyone significant, and now they've got like a new team principal now as well. But I think Bruno Famin stepped down, and they just look like a joke. And now the Works Alpine team, they're talking about dropping their Works engine and just being a normal team, but still calling themselves Alpine. It doesn't make it, for me. I mean, I always think the Aston Martin Honda thing's a bit strange, but that's fair enough. Then you can make a case for that. This is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you imagine Ferrari going, yeah, we're not good anymore. Let's get a Renault. Let's get like a, I don't know. Let's get a Mercedes engine or something. It just wouldn't happen. And Alpine's a sports, it's a sports car brand. They've did it to try and help the brand. Now the brand itself, apparently, more people know about it, so that's been a success. But now more people are going to know about it next year in a negative sense rather than anything else. I don't know about you, but I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty crazy situation. I think the fact that you have this works team that, like, for example, going into 2018, 2019, they were in a relatively strong position. They were best of the rest. They were looking like a team on the up. They were looking like the next new regulation change. They look like they could be a team that could be, jump into that top group.
Yeah.
And that's never really materialized. They've had, various 100 race plans that have kind of never really come to fruition as well.
No.
And I think they the one thing I think such a big red flag that I think doesn't get talked about as much is that they're a works team with their engine factory and their car chassis factory in different places, different countries. The chassis we know is built in Enstone in the UK, but the engine built in I think Fury in France. So you basically have a works team that has two separate factories, and it's very, very similar to, I believe, the situation that like Toyota had in the mid 2000s, where their engine was being built in like Germany, the car was being built in like Japan or somewhere else. And again, you basically are having all the costs associated with being a works team with none of the benefits of being able to integrate them and develop your car, together.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what they should have done is brung maybe the engine or the shaft, but brung realistically one of the two together, kind of like that Red Bull had done with Red Bull powertrains. And I think you would have had a much more harmonious relationship between the two. And obviously, yeah, that's an example now. Where it may have worked in the 90s,
Yeah,
it's not where as shown with Toyota. Even when
yeah,
you've got bagfuls of money, it's not working. It's
yeah.
not working in 2024. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess as a counterpoint to that argument, Red Bull showed with Honda that you can win
Hmm.
championships if your factories are in separate places. Because we know with Honda, the engine's built in Japan, and the car was obviously built in
Yeah.
Milton Keynes, and they obviously won. Effectively, they won the 2021. They've won all their titles realistically in the last 3 or 4 years with that current arrangement. Because we know Red Bull powertrains doesn't really get going for a
No,
while.
but I think no, but I think Honda when they
Yeah,
left Formula One at the end of 21, I think they
yeah,
moved to they moved all the Honda units into their factory, didn't they? And Honda says I think said they were I could be wrong, but I think Honda said they were assist. I think they've been making the engines there since
yeah.
2022 with the help of Honda. I could be wrong though.
Okay. Yeah, I'd
That's
have to.
what yeah, I'll have
Yeah,
to check that.
yeah,
That's what
I'd
I was
have
under the
to.
impression with.
Yeah,
Um, but you're right. I mean, look how yeah, and using that as an example, then I mean, Ferrari they've got it wrong and right a lot of the time. I mean, I think the best example is Mercedes.
yeah,
That they've done brilliantly, and even before Mercedes, where you had it wasn't McLaren and a works engine at Mercedes, it was at
yeah,
Ilmore, wasn't it, in the 90s, and
yeah,
one and from like 97 onwards, they were very very good together, even though
mm,
you had two separate
yeah,
packages, they worked together. But let's be fair, Mercedes are not going to be designing an engine to help the Alpine team. They're going to be designing an engine to help the Mercedes team, which is why McLaren, we said earlier, are doing so well and they're beating the works team, which is really, really good and unexpected.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, again, I think for Alpine, I think it definitely shows like a team in turmoil. And again, we've given all these
Yes.
examples showing that it can work with this kind of unique setup. I think the drivers have been okay. The car's been so poor, but that it's
Yeah.
really hard to assess their performances. But it really feels like both drivers have been pretty solid. Again, Gasly is sticking around for 2025, and they decided to let Ocon go in part or in full because of that Monaco crash, of course, where
Yeah.
Ocon decided to send it up the inside of Portier, of all places. Uh,
Whoops.
yeah, that was, and we know obviously Ocon has a bit of a reputation with, crashing with his teammates. And again, that's again another seat that's yet to be decided. Interesting to see who goes there. Might it be Bottas? Might it be Doohan? Jack Doohan? Might it be Mick Schumacher? Again, there's quite a few options there for that seat for 2025. Again, I'm kind of surprised that they decided to let Ocon go. I think Ocon is generally a better driver than any of the potential options they have available to them. And I would have just, given how bad things are, unless, the relationship between Ocon, the team, Gasly is so broken, I honestly would have tried to stick with it and just keep the lineup unchanged for 2025.
Okay, cool. There you go. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that probably would have been better. So, who is Jack Doohan going to be? Supposedly, is one of the rumored people, isn't it? Mick Schumacher was like a really far stretch rumor earlier this year as well, when there were rumors. But I think Jack Doohan, he hasn't signed yet. I'm hearing he's one of the favourites, though, to get that seat.
Yeah, yeah. I think because of with the Alpine potential restructuring, there's also the rumors around that they're potentially going to be bought by High Tech,
Okay.
the F2 team. And again, their team principal Oliver Oakes is
Yeah,
closely
of course.
associated with that team. So again, I even saw a crazy rumor that Nikita Mazepin might be coming back to F1 if that was the case. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. Uh,
No,
but but again, crazier things have happened in F1 as we have seen.
I know, Sebastian. I read that I think a couple of days ago, and I think I cried in the shower. It was fairly emotional. It was not good. That was not a good day.
No,
Um,
no.
but I guess if you're a Mazepin fan, fair, it may well be. But let's see.
Yeah. Okay. So we've gone almost all the teams. We've got one team left, and that, of course, is
Yep.
Sauber. Pretty horrid season from Sauber. The drivers have been okay. Bottas, I think, has been all right. Zhou's been struggling in qualifying quite a bit. The qualifying battle currently is 13-1 in Bottas's
Mm,
favor. Median qualifying gap, I think, is 4 to 5 tenths of a second. Again, not good. And it's actually a trend in the wrong direction for Zhou. In qualifying, his
yep.
best season was actually his rookie season. So I think, a lot of questions there about what's going to happen with Zhou's, what's his future in F1. I honestly think he's out. I think
Yeah.
even though he does bring sponsorship money, I think the improvement, the performance is just not there. And with the cost cap, and I think with generally the financial situation of F1 being in a pretty good spot, I think teams are a lot more focused on what's going on track and less on bags of money.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think Zhao not as bad as Sargent,
Yeah,
but in terms of he hasn't improved. He hasn't really shown an improvement, and I think Bottas is doing a much better job than some people are giving him credit for. To the point where you look at the driver market now, and if you're not taking, for example, a Liam Lawson maybe next year at
yeah.
risk, you got Hulkenberg. You could take the risk. I can't. I'm struggling to find someone. If you can, that'd be great, Sebastian. I'm struggling to find someone better than Bottas who will be at Audi at least the Sabra, at least for next year, for another year. I can't
No,
think of anyone that would be better than him at the moment now.
yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I think realistically, Bottas is the best driver available on the driver
Mm,
market. Again, if Ricardo found some of his old form, and again, if he was able to break free of the Red Bull family, again, I mean, I've seen a couple of things floating around that he'd be trying to leave the Red Bull family again if he was not able to get a seat at Red Bull itself. Again, you can make an argument that perhaps he would be a bit his ceiling, performance ceiling would be a little bit higher than Bottas's. But again, I do think in terms of consistency, in terms of just effort, performance, week in, week out, I think Bottas is probably the best available option left.
yeah.
I'd be quite surprised if Audi didn't pick him up.
Mm,
Again, if I was Alpine, I would also, and I wasn't, if I was Alpine and I wasn't super convinced by Jack Doohan, Bottas would definitely be a driver that I would try to, bring
yeah.
in for 2025 if I could.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Completely agree.
Yeah.
And I said they're the worst team. They scored no points, which is a massive surprise. But yeah, shocked.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Sauber slash Audi